Margaret Sullivan's fingers were blue when she lifted her youngest from the frozen stagecoach. 9 children, 11 cents, and a letter from a stranger promising food and shelter. She'd buried her husband 10 months ago, sold everything but the clothes on their backs, traveled 14 days through snow and ice with 9 hungry mouths and 1 desperate prayer. But when she looked up at the platform in Copper Springs, Montana, the townspeople weren't staring at her starving children. They were staring at her like she'd just signed her own death warrant. Before we continue Margaret's journey, hit that subscribe button and comment your city below. Let me know how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Margaret's arms were shaking so hard she nearly dropped Bridget. The 3-year-old whimpered against her neck, her small body burning with fever despite the bitter cold. 10 days of barely eating. 10 days of watching her baby grow weaker while Margaret could do nothing but pray. "Mama." Tommy's voice cut through the howling wind. "Mama, is this it?" Margaret forced her eyes to focus. The sign above the station read, "Copper Springs," in faded letters, half buried under snow. This was it. The end of the line. The last hope she had left. "Everyone off." Her voice came out cracked, barely human. "Stay together. Hold hands." "I can't feel my hands," Patrick complained. 9 years old and already too thin, his coat 3 sizes too small. "Then hold wrists. Move." She counted them as they stumbled off the stagecoach. Tommy first 15 and trying so hard to be a man. Then Rosie 12, clutching her dead father's handkerchief like a lifeline. Patrick behind her, then the twins. Loss and Lucy both, 7 identical down to their chattering teeth. Colleen came next, 6 years old, and silent as a ghost since Daniel died. Then Samuel 5, who hadn't stopped asking when Papa was coming back. And Martha 4, holding Samuel's hand with fierce determination. 9 children still breathing. Bridget made 10, but Bridget was barely breathing at all. "Ma'am?" Margaret spun toward the voice. A woman stood near the general store, middle-aged, wrapped in a fine wool coat that probably cost more than everything Margaret had ever owned. Tears were streaming down her weathered face. "Ma'am, are you the one who answered Mr. Callahan's advertisement?" Margaret's throat tightened. "I am." The woman's hand flew to her mouth. Oh Lord, have mercy." "Why?" Margaret stepped forward, her heart hammering. "What's wrong? Where is he?" "He's coming." The woman's voice broke. "He's coming, but ma'am, you need to know." "Know what?" A man's voice cut through from behind her. "That's enough, Esther." Margaret turned. He was tall, taller than Daniel had been. Broad shoulders, dark hair with silver at the temples, a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountains behind him. A scar traced his jaw, thin and white. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Gray-blue, like winter sky, and haunted. Deeply, terribly haunted. "Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Callahan, Nathaniel. Most folks call me Nate." He removed his hat. "You brought all 9. Was I supposed to leave some behind?" Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or guilt. "No, ma'am. The advertisement didn't mention." Would it have mattered? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, no, it wouldn't have. "Mama." Rosie's voice was thin with fear. "Mama, everyone's staring at us." Margaret looked around. The woman named Esther wasn't the only one watching. A dozen faces had gathered on the boardwalk, peering through frost-covered windows clustering in doorways. None of them looked welcoming. One man spat in the snow. Another shook his head slowly like he was watching a funeral procession. Why are they looking at us like that? Tommy's hand moved to his belt, where Daniel's old hunting knife hung hidden under his coat. "What'd we do?" "Nothing." Nate's voice was flat. "They're looking at me." "Why?" "Because some of them think I killed my wife." The words hit like a physical blow. Margaret's arms tightened around Bridget. Every instinct screamed at her to run to grab her children and disappear into the snow and never look back. But run where she had 11 cents, 9 children, a baby with fever. There was nowhere to go. "Did you?" she heard herself ask. Nate met her eyes. No flinching, no looking away. "No, ma'am, I did not." "Then why do they think—" "Mama." Patrick's voice cut through high and desperate. "Mama Colleen fell down." Margaret whirled. Her 6-year-old was crumpled in the snow, her small body shaking with silent sobs. Samuel stood over her helpless, his own legs trembling. "She's too cold." Tommy was already moving, scooping Colleen into his arms. "Ma, she's ice cold." "The wagon's this way." Nate's voice shifted, urgent now. "I've got blankets, food, we need to get them warm." Margaret hesitated. 1 heartbeat, 2. Her daughter was freezing. Her baby was burning with fever. Her other children were starving and exhausted and terrified. She had no choice. She'd never had a choice. "Lead the way." The wagon was better than anything Margaret had expected. Sturdy, well-built. 2 horses that looked healthier than her children, their coats gleaming, their bodies well-fed. She noticed. Of course she noticed. "These ain't poor farmers' horses," she said quietly, lifting Colleen into the wagon bed where Tommy had already spread blankets. Nate's hands tightened on the reins. "No, ma'am, they ain't." "Your letter said simple life, honest work, small farm needing a woman's touch." "I know what my letter said." "Then you lied." Silence. Behind them, the older children were helping the younger ones into the wagon. Loss was crying. Lucy was trying to comfort her. Patrick was arguing with Samuel about who got to sit where. Martha had climbed into Rosie's lap and refused to move. Normal sounds. Children sounds. The sounds of her family surviving 1 more minute, 1 more hour, 1 more day. "Ma." Tommy's voice was low, meant only for her. "You want me to—" "Get in the wagon, Thomas." "But now." Her eldest son's jaw tightened so like his father when Daniel was angry, but he obeyed. Margaret turned back to Nate. "You got something to say it now. I traveled 14 days with 9 children to get here. I ain't got patience for games." Nate exhaled slowly. "The ranch is bigger than I let on." "How much bigger?" 1,200 acres. Margaret's heart stopped. "And the house ain't small either. 12 rooms. Built it myself mostly. Mr. Callahan, I should have told you the truth from the start." His voice was rough, cracked like old leather. "I know that. But the last woman who knew what she was walking into—" He stopped, started again. "She didn't survive it, Mrs. Sullivan." "Your wife." "Catherine." The name came out like a wound. "She died 4 years ago. In that house. Some folks think I'm the one who killed her. And you're telling me this now? After I brought 9 children across the territory. I'm telling you because you deserve to know. Because if you want to turn around and get back on that stagecoach, I'll give you money for the fare. All of you." "Back to what?" Margaret's voice rose sharp with desperation and rage. "I got nothing back there. Nothing anywhere. I got 9 children, 11 cents, and a baby who might not make it through the night if I don't get her somewhere warm." Her voice broke. "I got nothing, Mr. Callahan. Don't you understand? I got nothing but them." Nate was quiet. Then slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He opened it to reveal bread, cheese, dried meat. "For the children," he said. "It ain't much, but it'll hold them till we get home." "Home?" The word tasted strange on Margaret's tongue. "Is that what this is?" "It could be, if you want it to be." Margaret looked at the food in his hands, looked at her children in the wagon behind her, hungry, cold, scared, but alive. All 9 of them still alive. She thought about Daniel, who died in a mine collapse trying to earn enough to keep them fed. thought about the farm they'd lost, the debts they couldn't pay, the creditors who'd taken everything but the clothes on their backs. She thought about the letter she'd written 3 months ago, desperate and ashamed, answering a stranger's advertisement because she had no other choice. Mrs. Sullivan. She took the food. My children eat first, then we talk. The ride to the ranch took nearly 2 hours. Margaret sat in the wagon bed with her children, distributing the food in careful portions. A bite of bread for Loss, a piece of cheese for Lucy, dried meat for the older ones who could chew it. She saved nothing for herself. Ma, you gotta eat too. Tommy pressed a piece of bread into her hand. I'm fine. You ain't eaten since yesterday. I said I'm fine, Thomas. Mama. Bridget's voice was barely a whisper. Mama, I'm cold. Margaret pulled the blankets tighter around her youngest, feeling the heat radiating from Bridget's small body. Too hot. Too dry. The fever was getting worse. I know, baby. We're almost there. Where's there? Our new home. Is Papa there? Margaret's throat closed. She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Papa's in heaven, Bertie. Rosie's voice was gentle, old beyond her 12 years. Remember, he's watching over us from heaven. But I want him here. I know. I want him here too. Silence fell over the wagon, heavy as the snow that had started falling again. Margaret looked at her children. Really looked at them for the first time in weeks. Tommy with his father's jaw and his father's stubborn pride. Rosie with her quiet strength and her endless journals. Patrick, who never stopped moving, never stopped asking questions. The twins, identical and inseparable, finishing each other's sentences. Colleen, who'd stopped talking almost entirely since Daniel died. Samuel, who still set a place for Papa at every meal. Martha, who'd taken to carrying her father's old pocket watch everywhere she went. And Bridget. Sweet Bridget, who'd never know her father at all. 9 children. Her 9 reasons to keep breathing. Ma. Patrick's face appeared over the wagon's edge. Ma, look. Margaret turned, and her stomach dropped. It wasn't a ranch. It wasn't even a farm. It was an empire. A massive house dominated the valley below, 2 stories of timber and stone windows, glinting gold in the dying light. A porch wrapped around 3 sides. Smoke curled from 2 chimneys. Beyond the house, buildings spread like a small town. A barn that could hold 50 horses. Workers' quarters, storage sheds, a separate cottage. And beyond that, land, endless land stretching to the mountains. Holy Moses, Patrick breathed. Language, Margaret said automatically, but her voice was faint. That ain't a farm. Tommy had climbed up beside Patrick, his face pale. Ma, that ain't a farm. I know. He lied to us. I know. What else did he lie about? Margaret didn't have an answer. The wagon rolled down toward the valley, toward the beautiful house with its smoking chimneys and its buried secrets. Margaret held Bridget closer and prayed. The woman who emerged onto the porch was nothing like Margaret expected. She was perhaps 60, silver-haired, dressed in practical wool rather than fine silk. Her face was lined but kind, her eyes sharp with intelligence. Nathaniel. Her voice carried across the yard. You're late. I was worried sick. The stage was delayed. Snow on the pass. Nate jumped down from the wagon. Aunt Adelaide, this is Mrs. Margaret Sullivan. The bride. Adelaide's eyes swept over Margaret, taking in her threadbare coat, her frost-bitten cheeks, her trembling arms wrapped around a feverish child. Then Adelaide looked at the wagon, at the faces peering over the sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 faces. All of them thin. All of them scared. 9, Adelaide said softly. You brought 9 children. Yes, ma'am. Margaret lifted her chin. Where I go, they go. Of course they do. Something flickered in Adelaide's face. Not disapproval, not judgment. Something else. Something Margaret couldn't read. The little one. Adelaide moved closer. She's sick. Fever, 10 days now. Has she been eating? Won't keep nothing down. Adelaide reached out, pressed her hand to Bridget's forehead. Her expression shifted. Bring her inside. Now. All of you inside. Martha's got soup on the stove, and bed's warming. Ma'am. We'll talk later. Right now, that baby needs tending. Margaret didn't argue. She couldn't argue. She let Adelaide guide her toward the house, let Nate help the other children down from the wagon, let herself be swept into the warmth of a home she didn't understand. The kitchen was larger than the entire farmhouse she'd lost. A woman stood at the stove, middle-aged Asian features, her dark hair streaked with gray. She turned as they entered, and her eyes widened at the parade of children filing through the door. How many? She asked Adelaide. 9. Lord have mercy. But she was already moving, pulling out bowls, ladling soup, her hands never stopping. Sit all of you. Eat first, talk later. The children didn't need to be told twice. Margaret watched them descend on the food like wolves. No manners, no restraint, just desperate hunger finally being fed. Tommy tried to eat slowly, tried to set an example, but even he couldn't help shoveling the soup into his mouth. When did they last eat properly? Adelaide asked quietly. 3 days ago. Maybe 4. Margaret's voice was hollow. Stage got stuck in a drift. Ran out of food. And you? Margaret didn't answer. Adelaide's hand closed around her arm, gentle but firm. Martha, take the baby. Get her fever down. No. Margaret's grip tightened on Bridget. I don't... Mrs. Sullivan. Adelaide's voice was kind, but brooking no argument. Martha raised 3 children of her own before she came here. She knows what she's doing, and you're about to collapse. I'm fine. You're not. You're exhausted and starving, and trying to hold yourself together for those children. I know, because I've been exactly where you're standing. Adelaide's eyes met hers, deep brown filled with something that looked almost like recognition. Let us help. That's all we're asking. Let us help. Margaret's arms loosened. Martha took Bridget, gently murmuring soft words Margaret couldn't hear. The baby whimpered, but didn't cry. Good. Adelaide guided Margaret to a chair. Now eat. Then we talk. I need to know. I know what you need, and you'll get answers. But first you eat. You're no good to those children dead. A bowl appeared in front of Margaret. Steam rose from it, carrying the smell of beef and vegetables and warmth. She picked up the spoon. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold it. She ate anyway. The children were fed and bathed and tucked into real beds for the first time in months. Margaret stood in the doorway of their room, 3 beds pushed together, all 9 children piled in like puppies, and felt something crack open in her chest. They were warm. They were fed. They were safe. For tonight, at least, they were safe. Mrs. Sullivan. She turned. Nate stood in the hallway, his hat in his hands, his haunted eyes darker in the lamplight. We need to talk. Yes. Margaret pulled the door almost closed, leaving a crack so she could hear if the children woke. We do. They walked downstairs in silence. The parlor was warm, a fire crackling and a hearth large enough to stand in. Adelaide was already there, seated in a high-backed chair, her face grave. Nate gestured to a chair. Margaret sat. Ask your questions, he said. Your wife. How did she really die? Nate flinched, but he didn't look away. Childbirth. The doctor was drunk. The midwife couldn't get through the snow in time. By the time help came, his voice cracked. It was too late, for both of them. Both. The baby. A boy. Nate's hands clenched at his sides. They're buried together, behind the house. Margaret thought of her own births. 9 times she'd walked through that valley. 9 times she'd emerged with a living child. Catherine Callahan hadn't been so lucky. "I'm sorry," Margaret said. "Truly. Thank you. But that don't explain why people think you killed her." Silence. Adelaide shifted in her chair. Nate's jaw tightened. "My father," he said finally. "My father wasn't a good man, Mrs. Sullivan. He built this ranch on other people's suffering. When he died, I inherited his land and his reputation." "What kind of suffering?" "Forced sales, intimidation. Some folks say worse." Nate's voice was flat emotionless, but Margaret could see the cost of that control in the white of his knuckles, the tension in his shoulders. Catherine found out. She was going through his papers trying to settle the estate, and she found things. What things? Proof. Of what he did. Of who helped him do it. Margaret's blood ran cold. She was going to expose it, go to the authorities, burn this whole legacy to the ground. Nate's laugh was bitter broken. "And then she died. Convenient, ain't it? You think someone—" "I don't know what I think. The doctor said it was complications, natural causes. But that doctor left town a week after the funeral and nobody's seen him since. And you've been living here for 4 years, with everyone thinking you're a murderer. Where else would I go?" Nate spread his hands. "This is my land. My curse. I can't run from what my father did. I can only try to make it right." "How?" "By finding the truth. By proving what really happened to Catherine. By returning what was stolen to the people it was stolen from. And that's why you placed the advertisement. Yes. You need help. I need someone I can trust, someone from outside, someone who doesn't have ties to this territory or the men who run it." Margaret stared at him. "You brought me here to solve your wife's murder." "I brought you here because I'm desperate." Nate's voice cracked. "Because I've been living in this house for 4 years surrounded by people who might be killers. Because I can't sleep without seeing Catherine's face. Because I read your letter, a widow with 9 children willing to travel across the territory for a chance at survival. And I thought—" "You thought what?" "I thought maybe you were strong enough to survive this." The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. Margaret thought about her children upstairs, warm and fed for the first time in weeks. Thought about the journey that had brought them here, the hunger, the cold, the desperation. She thought about Daniel, who'd died trying to provide for them. About all the promises she'd made at his grave. About the future she'd sworn to give their children. "Mr. Callahan." "Nate. Nate." She met his eyes. "I came here for my children. To give them food and shelter and a chance at a life. That's all I care about. That's all I've ever cared about." "I understand. But—" Margaret stood, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "If someone in this house killed your wife, if someone is still out there, still dangerous, then my children are in danger too." Nate's eyes widened slightly. "So here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, you tell me everything. Every secret, every lie, every shadow in this godforsaken place. And then we figure out the truth together. You'd do that. I'd do anything to keep my children safe." Margaret's jaw set. "Anything." For a long moment, Nate just looked at her. Then slowly he nodded. "Tomorrow," he said. "Everything. Everything." Margaret turned toward the stairs, toward her sleeping children, toward a future she couldn't predict, and a past she couldn't escape. Behind her, she heard Adelaide's voice, low and urgent. "She's strong, this one." "I know." Nate's response was barely a whisper. "That's what terrifies me." Margaret kept walking. She didn't look back, but she heard every word. That night, Margaret dreamed of Daniel. He was standing in a field of snow, smiling that crooked smile she'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. He reached for her, but when she tried to take his hand, he dissolved like smoke. "Be careful, Maggie," his voice echoed. "Be careful who you trust." She woke with tears on her cheeks and her daughter's name on her lips. Bridget. She was on her feet before she was fully awake, stumbling down the hall to where Martha had put the baby. The door was open. Bridget's bed was empty. No. The word came out as a moan. No, no, no. Mrs. Sullivan. Margaret whirled. Adelaide stood in the hallway, Bridget in her arms. The baby was awake, her cheeks pink, her eyes clear. Her fever broke an hour ago. Adelaide smiled gently. She's going to be fine. Margaret's legs gave out. She sat in the hallway floor sobbing, while Adelaide lowered herself down beside her and placed Bridget in her arms. She's going to be fine, Adelaide repeated. All of them are going to be fine. You don't know that. No. Adelaide's voice was soft. I don't. But I believe it. And sometimes belief is all we have. Margaret held her daughter, felt the steady beat of Bridget's heart against her chest, breathed in the smell of soap and warmth and life. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Adelaide's hand covered hers. Welcome home, Mrs. Sullivan. And despite everything, despite the secrets and the lies and the shadows waiting in the dark, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Ma. Patrick spotted her first. Ma, Miss Martha made pancakes. Real pancakes with real butter. I can see that. Margaret's voice came out thick. Did you say thank you? Yes, ma'am, 3 times. He ain't lying. Martha flipped another pancake with practiced ease. Boy's got manners when he wants to use 'em. Margaret moved into the kitchen, her eyes scanning automatically. Tommy at the table, eating slower than the others watching. Rosie with Bridget on her lap, feeding her small bites of soft bread. The twins arguing over the last piece of bacon. Colleen silent as always, but actually eating. Samuel chattering at Martha about the horses he'd seen through the window. Martha, the 4-year-old, had somehow gotten syrup in her hair. 9 children. All present. All breathing. All fed. Mrs. Sullivan. Adelaide's voice came from behind her. When you're ready, Nathaniel's waiting in the study. Margaret's stomach tightened. Now. He's been up since before dawn, going through his father's papers. Adelaide paused. He meant what he said last night. Everything. Margaret looked at her children one more time. Tommy caught her eye, nodded once. 15 years old and already reading her mind. I'll watch him, Ma. I know you will. She followed Adelaide down a long hallway. The study was smaller than she'd expected, warm, cluttered with books and papers, a fire burning low in the grate. Nate stood by the window, his back to her shoulders, rigid. Close the door. Margaret did. What I'm about to show you. Nate turned. His face was gray eyes rimmed with red. He hadn't slept. It don't leave this room, not until we figure out what to do with it. Understood. He moved to the desk and lifted a leather folder thick with yellowed papers. Catherine found this hidden in the barn 3 weeks before she died. False bottom in a feed bin, been there for years. His hands shook as he opened it. My father's records. His real records. Margaret stepped closer. The first page was a list of names. 12 of them with dates beside each one. Some of the dates had been crossed out and replaced with a single word, resolved. What does resolved mean? It means they're dead. Nate's voice was hollow. Or gone. Driven off their land by any means necessary. Margaret's blood chilled. Your father killed these people. Not with his own hands. He hired men to do it. Burned crops, poisoned wells, slaughtered livestock. And when that didn't work, Nate turned to the next page. He paid someone to finish the job. The page was a ledger. Payments made to someone identified only as JWW. $500 here, $300 there. Each payment corresponded to a name from the first list. JW, Margaret said. You know who that is? Not yet, but I'm going to find out. And Catherine. She was going to take this to the authorities. She was going to take it to the federal marshal in Helena. She'd already written the letter. Nate's jaw tightened. I found it in her things after. Never sent. Why not? Because she died 3 days before she planned to leave. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows. Margaret's mind was racing. The doctor who delivered the baby. The drunk one. What was his name? Whitfield. Marcus Whitfield. And he left town right after. Week later, packed up in the middle of the night, gone before sunrise. Someone paid him. That's what I think. But who your father was already dead. Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out another paper, newer, the ink darker. This is what I found last night, tucked into the back of the folder like someone added it later. Margaret took the paper. Her hands went cold. It was a payment receipt. $500 to JW, dated 3 weeks before Catherine's death. But the signature at the bottom wasn't Nate's father. It was someone named Cornelius Whitmore. Who is that? Judge Cornelius Whitmore. Nate's voice was barely controlled. He controls the territorial courts. Half the politicians in Montana owe him favors. And apparently, he was my father's partner in all of this. A judge. A murderer hiding behind a bench. Margaret stared at the signature. Neat, precise, confident. The handwriting of a man who'd never been held accountable for anything. He's still alive. Lives in Copper Springs. Big house on the hill, overlooks the whole town. Nate laughed bitterly. I see him every Sunday at church. He shakes my hand, asks about the ranch, tells me how sorry he was about Catherine. And you've never... I didn't have proof. Not until now. Nate took the paper back, his fingers trembling. But this changes everything. This connects him directly to the killings, to Catherine. He'll know you have it. He might already know. Someone's been watching the ranch. I've seen riders on the ridge keeping their distance, but always there. Margaret's blood ran cold. For how long? Weeks, maybe longer. Nate met her eyes. That's why I placed the advertisement. I needed someone here, someone who could help me figure this out before Whitmore makes his move. What kind of move? I don't know. But a man who's killed to protect his secrets won't stop now. The door burst open. Margaret spun, her heart slamming against her ribs. Tommy stood in the doorway, breathing hard. Ma, there's men outside. 3 of them. They're asking for Mr. Callahan. Nate was already moving. Where? Front porch. Big one's got a badge. Margaret followed Nate through the house, her mind racing. Badge meant law. Law in this territory meant Whitmore. She reached the porch just as Nate stepped outside. 3 men waited in the yard. 2 of them were rough-looking, the kind of men who enjoyed violence. The third was different, silver-haired, expensive coat, soft hands that had never seen real work. Mr. Callahan. The silver-haired man smiled. I hope we're not interrupting. Judge Whitmore. Nate's voice was carefully neutral. This is unexpected. Margaret's stomach dropped. This was him. The man whose signature was on that payment. The man who might have killed Catherine Callahan. And he was standing 20 feet from her children. I heard you had a visitor. Whitmore's eyes slid to Margaret, cool and assessing. Several visitors, in fact. Mrs. Sullivan and her children. They arrived yesterday. Yes, I heard. Whitmore's smile didn't reach his eyes. Another bride. My. You do go through them quickly. Is there something I can help you with, Judge? Just a friendly visit. Wanted to make sure you were settling in all right. His gaze lingered on Margaret. And to welcome your new family to our community. We appreciate the thought. I'm sure you do. Whitmore stepped forward, and Margaret felt every muscle in her body tense. Mrs. Sullivan, is it? That's right. A widow, I understand. With 9 children. He shook his head slowly. Tragic. Simply tragic. How did your husband die? Mining accident. Margaret kept her voice flat. 10 months ago. My condolences. The word held no warmth. It must be difficult, raising 9 children alone. I manage. I'm sure you do. His eyes swept over her, calculating. Strong women always do. It's the weak ones who don't survive out here. Something cold slithered down Margaret's spine. Well. Whitmore stepped back, adjusting his gloves. I won't keep you. I'm sure you have much to discuss. His eyes flicked to Nate. Business matters, perhaps. Old papers, that sort of thing. Nate's face didn't change, but Margaret saw his hand twitch toward his belt. Just settling the family in, Nate said evenly. Of course. Of course. Whitmore mounted his horse, his men following. Do give my regards to your aunt, and Mrs. Sullivan. He tipped his hat. Welcome to Copper Springs. I do hope you survive longer than the last one. He rode away, his men flanking him like wolves. Margaret didn't breathe until they disappeared over the ridge. He knows. Her voice was barely a whisper. He knows you found something. Yeah. Nate's face was pale. He knows. What do we do? Nate turned to look at her, and for the first time, she saw fear in those haunted gray eyes. We get those papers to Helena, before he stops us. The next 3 days passed in a blur of tension and preparation. Margaret learned the ranch, not just its size, but its rhythms. The hands who worked the cattle, the cook who ruled the kitchen, the patterns of who went where and when. She learned Adelaide, too. The older woman was sharper than she let on, her mild manner hiding a steel core. I was there when Catherine died. Adelaide told her on the second night while the children slept. Held her hand while she screamed, watched her bleed out while that useless doctor fumbled around drunk. You think it was murder? I think that girl was healthy as a horse until she started digging into James's past. And I think she was terrified those last few weeks, jumping at shadows, looking over her shoulder. Adelaide's voice hardened. She told me she'd found something that would destroy powerful men. 3 days later, she was dead. Did she tell you what she found? No. Said it was safer if I didn't know. Adelaide's eyes glistened. She was protecting me. Even at the end, she was protecting everyone but herself. Margaret thought about the papers in Nate's study. The names, the payments, the signature. Whitmore. I always suspected. Never had proof. Adelaide gripped Margaret's hand. But you do now, you and Nathaniel, which means you're both in danger. I know. Do you really? Adelaide leaned closer. Cornelius Whitmore has been running this territory for 30 years. He's got the sheriff in his pocket, the courts under his thumb, and men willing to kill for the price of a bottle of whiskey. You think he's going to let 2 strangers destroy everything he's built? He can try to stop us. He will try, and he might succeed. Adelaide's voice dropped. Catherine was strong too. Strong and brave and determined to do the right thing, and she's buried behind this house. Margaret felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. What would you have me do? Run, take my children, and disappear? I'd have you survive, whatever that takes. Surviving ain't enough. Margaret's jaw set. I spent 10 months surviving, watching my children starve, losing everything we had, scraping by on scraps and prayers. That ain't living. That's just waiting to die slower. Adelaide stared at her. Nate asked me to help him find the truth. I said yes. Not because I'm brave, not because I'm foolish, because my children are in that house. Margaret's voice shook with fury. And as long as Whitmore is out there, as long as this secret stays buried, they're in danger. So I'm going to help Nate expose him. I'm going to help bring that man down. And then I'm going to raise my children in peace the way they deserve. For a long moment, Adelaide said nothing. Then slowly she smiled. Catherine would have liked you. I wish I'd known her. You would have been friends. Adelaide squeezed her hand. Be careful, Margaret, please. For your children's sake, be careful. I will. But even as she said it, Margaret knew, careful might not be enough. The third morning, everything changed. Margaret was in the kitchen, helping Martha knead bread when Tommy burst through the door. "Ma, Ryder coming, fast!" She wiped her hands and followed him to the porch. A single horse was thundering toward the ranch, its rider bent low over the neck. As it got closer, Margaret recognized one of Nate's hands, a young man named Charlie, who'd been sent to town for supplies. He pulled up Hard Horse, lathered and heaving. "Mr. Callahan!" Charlie was shouting before he hit the ground. "Mr. Callahan, you gotta come quick!" Nate appeared from the barn, Adelaide close behind. "What is it?" "Sheriff Dawson. He's got a warrant." Charlie was gasping, eyes wild. "For your arrest. Says you murdered Catherine." The world stopped. Margaret felt the blood drain from her face. "On what grounds?" Nate's voice was deadly calm. "New evidence," he says. "Witness came forward. Says they saw you arguing with Mrs. Callahan the night before she died. Says you threatened her." "That's a lie." "Don't matter what it is. Dawson's on his way here with 6 men. They'll be here within the hour." Adelaide gripped Nate's arm. "Whitmore. This is Whitmore." "I know. He's trying to stop you before you can get those papers out." "I know." Margaret's mind was racing. "If they arrest you, you'll never make it to trial. Something will happen in that jail." Nate met her eyes. "I know." "Then run. Take the papers, ride for Helena, get them to the federal marshal. And leave you here, you and 9 children alone with Whitmore's men." Nate shook his head. "I won't do it." "You have to." "No." "Nathaniel." "I said no." His voice cracked. "I already lost Catherine because I wasn't here to protect her. I won't make that mistake again. This ain't about protecting me." Margaret grabbed his arm. "This is about the truth, about justice, about making sure Catherine didn't die for nothing." "Ma." Tommy's voice cut through. Margaret turned. Her son was standing rigid, his face pale but determined. "I'll go." "What?" "I'll take the papers. I know how to ride. I know how to stay hidden." Tommy's jaw set exactly like his father's used to. "I can make it to Helena." "Absolutely not." "Ma, you're 15 years old. I'm old enough to do what needs doing." Tommy stepped forward. "Pa's dead. You got 8 other children to protect. Someone has to carry those papers, and it ain't gonna be Mr. Callahan if they're coming to arrest him." "Thomas Daniel Sullivan, let me do this." Her son's voice broke just slightly. "Let me do something that matters. Please." Margaret stared at him. This boy who'd grown up too fast, who'd carried too much, who was standing there, offering to risk his life for people he'd known 3 days. "No." Nate's voice was firm. "I won't send a child to do my duty." "Then we all go." Adelaide stepped forward. "All of us together. Martha can take the other children to the line cabin, hide them until this is over." "There ain't time." "Then we make time." Adelaide's voice rose. "I am not losing another person I love to Cornelius Whitmore. Not you, not this woman, not her children. We go together, or we don't go at all." Hoofbeats echoed in the distance. Everyone froze. Charlie's face went white. "They're early. God help us, they're early." Margaret's heart slammed against her ribs. She looked at her children, some in the kitchen, some on the porch, all of them watching with wide, terrified eyes. "Tommy, get your brothers and sisters inside, now." "But Ma..." "Now." Tommy grabbed Patrick's arm, started shoving children toward the door. Rosie scooped up Bridget. The twins ran hand in hand. Colleen, Samuel, Martha, all of them moving, herded like sheep. "Mrs. Sullivan." Nate's hand closed on her arm. "Whatever happens, don't let them separate us. Whitmore wants me alone. As long as there's witnesses, he can't." The first riders crested the hill. 6 men, just as Charlie said. Sheriff Dawson in front, tin star glinting on his chest. Behind him, 4 deputies and 1 man in a fine black coat. Whitmore. He'd come himself. Margaret felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "Stay behind me," Nate murmured. "Like hell." She stepped up beside him shoulder to shoulder and faced the men who'd come to destroy them. Dawson pulled his horse up short. "Nathaniel Callahan, I got a warrant for your arrest on suspicion of murder." "Murder of who?" "Your wife, Catherine Callahan." Dawson's voice was flat rehearsed. "New witness has come forward with testimony placing you at the scene." "The scene was my own bedroom. Where else would I be when my wife was giving birth?" "Witness says you argued with her, threatened her life." "What witness?" Dawson hesitated. His eyes flicked to Whitmore. "That's confidential." "Convenient." Whitmore nudged his horse forward, that thin smile on his lips. Now, Mr. Callahan. There's no need for hostility. The sheriff is simply doing his job. Surely you understand the importance of the law." "I understand you're using it as a weapon." "Such accusations." Whitmore tisked. "I'm merely a concerned citizen here to ensure justice is served." "Justice." Nate laughed bitterly. "You don't know the meaning of the word." "Perhaps not, but I know the meaning of this." Whitmore produced a folded paper. "A warrant, Mr. Callahan, signed by a territorial judge, perfectly legal, perfectly binding." "Signed by you?" "Signed by my colleague, Judge Hartwell, actually. I recused myself given our personal history." Whitmore's smile widened. "Everything above board, everything proper." Margaret stepped forward. "You're not taking him." Whitmore's eyes slid to her. Cold. Predatory. "Mrs. Sullivan, I don't believe this concerns you." "It concerns me when you're trying to frame an innocent man." "Frame strong words from a woman who's been here 3 days." Whitmore tilted his head. "Tell me, what exactly do you think you know?" "I know enough." "Do you?" He leaned forward in his saddle. "Let me tell you what I know, Mrs. Sullivan. I know you're a widow with 9 children and no money. I know you answered an advertisement from a suspected murderer because you had no other options. And I know that whatever fantasies Mr. Callahan has spun for you, they won't protect you when this is over." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." Whitmore's voice hardened. "This territory has laws. Those laws will be enforced, and anyone who interferes with that enforcement will face consequences. Even women and children." Something flickered in Whitmore's eyes, just for a moment. "I'm not a monster, Mrs. Sullivan. Your children are perfectly safe as long as you don't do anything foolish." "Like what?" "Like hiding evidence, spreading lies, helping a murderer escape justice." He smiled again. "Things like that tend to have unfortunate results." Margaret felt the threat wrap around her throat like a noose. "Sheriff," Nate's voice was steady, "if you're going to arrest me, do it. But know this, there are papers in this house. Papers that prove Cornelius Whitmore has been involved in fraud, theft, and murder for 30 years. If anything happens to me, those papers go to the federal marshal in Helena." Dawson's face went pale. "What papers?" "Don't listen to him." Whitmore's voice was sharp. "He's desperate making up stories. I've got names, dates, and payments, including payments to whoever killed Catherine." Nate stared straight at Whitmore. "Including a payment made 3 weeks before she died, with your signature on it." Silence. Dawson looked at Whitmore. The deputies shifted uneasily. "He's lying," Whitmore said, but his voice had lost its smoothness. "There are no such papers." "Then you won't mind if the sheriff searches the house to verify that—" "That's not necessary. If there's nothing to find, what's the harm?" Whitmore's face twisted. Margaret watched him calculate, watched him weigh his options, consider his moves, search for a way out. This was a man used to controlling every situation, and for the first time he wasn't in control. "Sheriff Dawson," Whitmore's voice was ice. "Execute the warrant. Arrest Mr. Callahan, now." Dawson hesitated. Now, Sheriff. The tin star on Dawson's chest seemed to weigh him down. Margaret could see it in his face, the conflict, the doubt, the fear. Mr. Callahan. Dawson's voice was hoarse. I'm going to need you to come with me. On fabricated charges. On legal charges backed by a warrant. But Dawson wouldn't meet his eyes. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Sheriff. Everyone. Dawson flinched. Mama. Margaret's blood froze. She turned. Bridget stood on the porch having escaped from her siblings. 3 years old, clutching a rag doll, staring at the men with horses and guns. Mama, what's happening? One of the deputies moved toward the porch. Margaret was between them before she knew she'd moved. Touch my daughter, and I'll kill you myself. The deputy stopped short. Ma'am, I said stay back. Mrs. Sullivan. Whitmore's voice was silk over steel. Control yourself. No one is threatening your children. Then keep your men away from them. She scooped Bridget into her arms, backing toward the house. Her heart was pounding so hard, she could barely think. Tommy appeared in the doorway, the other children behind him. Ma. Get inside, all of you, now. But. Inside Thomas. The children retreated. Margaret turned back to face the men Bridget clutched tight against her chest. You want to arrest Mr. Callahan, you do it. But those papers exist. And if anything happens to him, anything at all, they go straight to Helena. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Sullivan. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Whitmore smiled. It was the coldest smile Margaret had ever seen. Very well. Sheriff, proceed with the arrest, but leave 2 men here to ensure Mrs. Sullivan and her children remain safe. Safe. Margaret's voice dripped contempt. Of course. A widow alone with 9 children in this dangerous territory, we wouldn't want anything to happen to them. The threat was crystal clear. Nate stepped forward. If you harm them, harm them. Mr. Callahan, please. I'm simply providing protection. Whitmore's smile widened. After all, you won't be here to protect them yourself. 2 deputies dismounted, moving toward the house. Margaret's mind raced. 2 guards meant surveillance. Surveillance meant no way to get the papers out. No way to contact Helena. No way to expose Whitmore before it was too late. They were trapped. Nate. She caught his arm as Dawson moved forward with shackles. Nate, don't. It's going to be all right. His voice was calm, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Take care of the children. Adelaide will help you. I'm not letting them take you. You don't have a choice. He pressed something into her palm, small metal warm from his body. 3rd brick from the left in the study fireplace. Push it and the back opens. You'll find everything. Nate. Promise me, Margaret. His voice broke. Promise me you'll get those papers to Helena. Promise me Catherine didn't die for nothing. Tears burned her eyes. I promise. They took him. Margaret stood on the porch with Bridget in her arms and watched them shackle Nathaniel Callahan like a common criminal. Watched them put him on a horse, hands bound behind his back. Watched Whitmore tip his hat in mock courtesy before riding away. The 2 deputies remained positioning themselves near the barn with clear sightlines to the house. Ma. Tommy's voice came from behind her. Ma, what do we do? Margaret looked at the key in her hand. Looked at her children gathered in the doorway. Looked at Adelaide, whose face was pale with fury and grief. We wait, she said. And then we fight. The sun set over Copper Springs, painting the sky red as blood. And Margaret Sullivan began planning her war. The key burned in Margaret's palm like a brand. She waited until full dark, until the deputies had settled into their watch by the barn, until her children were in bed, pretending to sleep. Then she moved. The study door creaked. She froze, heart slamming against her ribs. Nothing. No shouts, no footsteps. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The fireplace was cold, ashes gray and dead. Margaret knelt on the hearth, counting bricks from the left. 1, 2, 3. She pushed. The brick shifted. Then the whole back panel swung inward, revealing a hollow space beyond. Margaret reached in and pulled out a leather satchel, heavy with papers. She opened it, hands shaking, and saw names, dates, payments, everything Nate had described and more. Enough to destroy Cornelius Whitmore. Enough to bring justice to Catherine Callahan and every family his father had ruined. Enough to get them all killed if Whitmore found out she had it. Ma. Margaret spun, shoving the satchel behind her back. Tommy stood in the doorway, fully dressed, his father's knife at his belt. What are you doing up? Same thing you are. Her son stepped into the room and closed the door. Figured you'd go for those papers tonight? You should be in bed. So should you. Tommy's jaw set. What's the plan? There ain't a plan yet. Then let's make one. Margaret stared at her son, this boy, who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who carried too much weight on too young shoulders. Tommy? Don't. His voice cracked. Don't tell me to go back to bed. Don't tell me I'm too young. Pa's dead. Mr. Callahan's in jail. Those men out there ain't going to let us just walk away. He stepped closer. I know what's at stake, Ma. Let me help. Margaret's throat tightened. She thought about Daniel, who'd worked himself to death trying to provide for them. Thought about all the times she'd tried to shield Tommy from the hard truths of their lives. Thought about how that shielding had done nothing but make him feel helpless. All right. She pulled out the satchel. We need to get these to Helena, Federal Marshal's office. How far? 3 days' ride. Maybe 4 in this weather. And those deputies. They're watching the main road, but there's other ways off this property. Margaret paused. Adelaide mentioned an old mining trail. Goes through the mountains, comes out north of town. I can take it. No. Ma. I said no, Thomas. I ain't sending you alone into those mountains in winter. Then who? You can't go. Bridget needs you, the little ones need you. Adelaide's too old. Martha can't leave the house. Tommy's voice rose. There ain't nobody else. Keep your voice down. Then stop treating me like a child. His eyes blazed. I can do this. I know how to ride, how to survive in the cold. Pa taught me. You taught me. Let me use what I learned. Margaret wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to protect him, to keep him safe, to find another way. But there was no other way. If I let you go, she said slowly, you follow the trail exactly as Adelaide describes. You don't stop for anyone. You don't trust anyone. You get to Helena, you find the federal marshal, and you give him these papers. Nothing else matters. I understand. And if something goes wrong, if they catch you, you hide those papers. Bury them, burn them, throw them in a river. Whitmore can't get his hands on them. Ever. Tommy nodded. I understand. Margaret looked at her son one last time, memorized his face, his father's jaw, his grandmother's eyes. I love you, Thomas Daniel Sullivan, more than you'll ever know. I know, Ma. He hugged her, fierce and brief. I love you too. Adelaide appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. The deputies are changing watch. There's maybe 10 minutes where the barn side is unguarded. She pressed a folded paper into Tommy's hand. The trail's marked here. Follow it exactly one wrong turn, and you'll be lost in those mountains forever. Yes, ma'am. There's food in the saddlebag and an extra blanket. The gray mare is fastest. She knows mountain trails. Thank you. Adelaide gripped his shoulders. Your mother's trusting you with everything that matters. Don't make her regret it. I won't. Margaret walked with him to the back of the house, staying in shadows, moving silent as ghosts. The cold hit them like a wall, bitter, bone-deep, the kind of cold that killed unprepared travelers. Tommy. Margaret caught his arm one last time. Promise me. Promise me you'll come back." "I promise." He slipped into the darkness, and Margaret watched him go until she couldn't see him anymore. Then she went back inside and started preparing for war. The first deputy noticed something was wrong at dawn. Margaret heard the shout from the kitchen where she'd been pretending to make breakfast. Her hands tightened on the kettle, but she kept her face neutral as heavy boots pounded toward the house. The door burst open. "Where's the boy?" Margaret turned slowly. Deputy Harrison, the meaner one with small eyes and a cruel mouth, stood in the doorway, his hand on his gun. "Which boy? I got 4 of them." "Don't play dumb with me. The oldest one, Tommy." "What about him?" "He ain't in his bed. Horse is gone from the barn." Harrison stepped closer. "Where'd he go?" Margaret shrugged. "Boys his age do foolish things. Probably went for a ride to clear his head." "In this weather in the dark." "Like I said, foolish." Harrison's face twisted. He grabbed Margaret's arm, yanking her close. "Listen here, woman. Judge Whitmore gave specific orders nobody leaves this ranch. Your boy's out there somewhere and I want to know where he went." "Get your hands off my mother." Patrick's voice rang out from the doorway. 9 years old, skinny as a rail, but standing like he was ready to fight. "Patrick, go back upstairs." "He's hurting you." "I'm fine. Go." "But now, Patrick." Harrison released her arm with a shove. "This ain't over. When Judge Whitmore finds out—" "Then you'd better tell him, hadn't you?" Margaret rubbed her arm where bruises were already forming. "Go on. Run and tell your master what happened. See if I care." Harrison's face went red with fury, but he turned and stalked out. The moment he was gone, Margaret's composure cracked. "Ma!" Rosie appeared from the hallway, Bridget on her hip. "Ma, what's happening?" "Nothing. Everything's fine." "Where's Tommy?" "Doing something important." Margaret forced herself to straighten to focus. "I need you to keep the little ones calm. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good girl." Adelaide entered the kitchen, her face grim. "Harrison's riding to town, going to tell Whitmore." "I figured." "Which means we've got maybe 2 hours before this whole place is crawling with his men." "I know." "What do we do?" Margaret thought about Tommy somewhere in those mountains carrying everything that mattered. Thought about Nate locked in a cell, waiting for a trial that would never be fair. Thought about her 8 remaining children trapped in a house surrounded by enemies. "We hold on," she said. "Whatever it takes, we hold on until Tommy reaches Helena." The 2 hours passed like 2 years. Margaret kept the children inside, away from windows, away from doors. She told them stories, played games, did everything she could to keep them calm, while her own heart threatened to pound out of her chest. Adelaide paced the parlor like a caged animal. Martha stayed in the kitchen cooking food nobody would eat. And outside, the world went quiet. Too quiet. "Ma." Rosie's voice was barely a whisper. "Someone's coming." Margaret moved to the window, staying to the side, peeking through the edge of the curtain. Riders. At least a dozen pouring over the ridge like a black flood. Whitmore rode at their head. "Adelaide." Margaret's voice didn't shake. "Take the children to the cellar." "Margaret? Now." "Ma, no." Patrick grabbed her arm. "We ain't leaving you. You're going to do exactly what I say." Margaret knelt, gripping his shoulders. "You're going to take your brothers and sisters to the cellar. You're going to stay quiet, stay hidden, and you're not going to come out until I come get you. Understand?" "But Wana, Patrick, this is important. The most important thing you've ever done." She pulled him close, pressed a kiss to his forehead. "I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me?" His lip trembled, but he nodded. "That's my boy." She watched Adelaide herd them down the cellar stairs. Rosie with Bridget Patrick pulling the twins. Colleen silent as a shadow, Samuel clinging to Martha's hand. 8 children disappearing into darkness. Then Margaret closed the cellar door and turned to face the front of the house alone. Whitmore dismounted slowly, deliberately. Margaret stepped onto the porch. "Mrs. Sullivan." His voice carried across the yard, smooth as silk. "We need to talk." "So talk." "Inside, I think. This cold is rather unpleasant." "You ain't coming in my house." "Your house." Whitmore laughed. "Mrs. Sullivan, this isn't your house. It belongs to a man currently sitting in jail awaiting trial for murder. You have no claim to anything here." "I got 9 children who live here. That's claim enough." 8 children, actually." Whitmore's smile sharpened. "Unless you'd like to tell me where the 9th one is." Margaret said nothing. "No, then let me make a guess." Whitmore climbed the porch steps, stopping just inches from her. "Young Thomas, resourceful boy, from what I hear, is currently riding north with certain documents that don't belong to him. Documents that could cause considerable trouble for considerable people." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you—" Whitmore's hand shot out, grabbing her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Let me be very clear, Mrs. Sullivan. Your son is out there alone in mountains that have killed men twice his age. My men are already tracking him. They will find him. And when they do—" He left the threat hanging. "If you hurt my son, I don't want to hurt anyone." Whitmore released her chin. "I want those papers. Give me the originals, call off your boy, and this all goes away. You can take your children and leave this territory. Start fresh somewhere else. No harm done. And Nate? Mr. Callahan will face justice for his crimes." "What crimes? The only criminal here is you." Whitmore's face hardened. "You have 1 hour, Mrs. Sullivan. 1 hour to produce those documents, or tell me where your son is heading. After that—" He gestured to his men. "I stopped being polite." He turned and walked back to his horse, leaving Margaret standing alone on the porch with her heart in her throat. 1 hour. Margaret spent it preparing. She loaded Daniel's old rifle, kept hidden in the root cellar behind a false wall, the one thing she'd refused to sell. She showed Adelaide where the ammunition was stored. She wrote a letter just in case, telling her children she loved them and to find a way to Helena no matter what. And she prayed. For Tommy in the mountains. For Nate in that cell. For her children in the cellar. For herself, standing at the window, watching Whitmore's men fan out around the property, like wolves circling prey. The hour ended. Whitmore approached the house again, but this time he didn't come alone. 4 of his men flanked him, and between them walked Sheriff Dawson. Face pale, hands shaking, the look of a man who knew he was about to do something unforgivable. "Time's up, Mrs. Sullivan." Margaret opened the door, but stayed inside Daniel's rifle held low at her side. "I ain't got nothing to give you." "Then you've made your choice." Whitmore nodded to his men. "Search the house. Find the papers and the children. Touch my children, and I'll kill every man who comes through this door." The men hesitated. "She's one woman with an old rifle." Whitmore's voice dripped contempt. "You're 4 armed men. Do your jobs." The first man stepped forward. Margaret raised the rifle. "I'm warning you." "Ma'am, put the gun down. Nobody needs to get hurt." "Then stay out of my house." Another step. Another. Margaret's finger tightened on the trigger. A shot rang out, but not from her rifle. The lead man stumbled, clutching his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. Everyone froze. "Next one goes between someone's eyes." The voice came from above. Margaret looked up. Adelaide stood at a second-floor window, a hunting rifle in her hands, smoke curling from the barrel. "Adelaide!" Whitmore's voice was ice. "I should have known." "You should have known a lot of things, Cornelius, like what happens when you threaten a woman's family." Adelaide chambered another round. "Now get off this property before I put the next bullet somewhere more permanent." "You're making a mistake." "Only mistake I ever made was keeping quiet for 30 years. That ends today." Whitmore's face contorted. For a moment, Margaret saw the mask slip, saw the ugly, vicious creature beneath the polished exterior. You think this changes anything? My men are already hunting that boy. They'll find him before sunset. And when they do, ma'am? The shout came from the ridge. One of Whitmore's scouts riding hard toward the house. Ma'am, riders coming from the north, at least 20 of them. Whitmore's head snapped around. What? Federal badges, sir. They're carrying federal badges. Margaret's heart stopped. Federal. From the north. From Helena. But that was impossible. Tommy couldn't have reached Helena yet. There wasn't time, unless... No, Whitmore's voice cracked. No, that's not possible. But it was. The riders crested the ridge, and at their head rode a man in a long coat with a marshal's star on his chest, and beside him, on a gray mare lathered with sweat. Tommy! Margaret's voice broke. Tommy! Her son was alive. He'd made it. Mrs. Sullivan? The lead marshal dismounted, his face grim. I'm Marshal Crawford. Your boy found us on the trail. Seems we were already heading this way. Already heading? Got a telegram 3 days ago. Anonymous tip about corruption in the territorial courts. Suspicious death of a Mrs. Catherine Callahan. We've been investigating Judge Whitmore for weeks. Margaret's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch steps, rifle clattering beside her, while the world spun and blurred around her. Tommy was at her side in seconds. Ma, are you okay? You're alive. I'm alive. You made it. I made it. He was crying, tears streaming down his face, but he was smiling too. I found them on the trail, Ma. They were already coming. Someone told them. Who? I don't know. They said the tip came from someone inside Whitmore's operation. Someone who wanted out. Margaret looked at Sheriff Dawson, who stood frozen near his horse face, white as bone. Their eyes met. Dawson looked away. Marshal Crawford. Whitmore's voice had recovered its smoothness, but Margaret could hear the desperation beneath. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. I'm a territorial judge, and these people have evidence. Judge Whitmore. Evidence that connects you to fraud, theft, extortion, and murder. Crawford pulled a folded paper from his coat. Including the murder of Catherine Callahan. That's preposterous. Nathaniel Callahan killed his wife. Everyone knows what you told them, what you paid them to believe. Crawford's voice hardened. But we've got the real story now. Payment records, witness statements, everything. You're done. Whitmore's mask shattered. In that moment, Margaret saw him for what he truly was, not a powerful judge, not a clever manipulator, just a small vicious man whose empire of lies was crumbling around him. You can't do this. His voice rose to a shriek. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've built? I know exactly what you've built. Crawford nodded to his men. Take him. The deputies moved forward. Whitmore's hand went to his gun. Don't. Margaret was on her feet. Daniel's rifle back in her hands, pointed at Whitmore's chest. Don't you dare. You've caused enough death. It ends here. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Whitmore's shoulders slumped. His hand dropped to his side. They took him in chains. Margaret watched them load him onto a horse, watched them bind his wrists, watched the most powerful man in the territory reduced to a common prisoner. It was over. Ma, Tommy's voice was hoarse. Ma, can we go get Bridget and the others now? They're probably scared. Margaret laughed, a broken hysterical sound that turned into sobbing halfway through. Yeah, baby. Yeah, let's go get them. She walked into the house on legs that felt like water. Tommy's arm around her waist, and opened the cellar door. 8 faces looked up at her from the darkness. 8 children scared and huddled together waiting for their mother. It's over, Margaret said. It's all over. You can come out now. Bridget reached her first small arms, wrapping around her neck so tight Margaret could barely breathe. Mama, I was scared. I know, baby, I know, but you were so brave. You were all so brave. Patrick pushed through, followed by the twins, then Samuel and Martha. Colleen came last, silent as always, but she pressed herself against Margaret's side and didn't let go. Rosie stood back, holding space for the little ones, but her eyes were streaming tears. Tommy found the marshals. Tommy found the marshals. And Mr. Callahan. Margaret's heart clenched. In all the chaos, she'd almost forgotten. Marshal Crawford. She turned Bridget, still in her arms. Mr. Callahan. He's in the town jail. They arrested him on false charges. Already sent men to release him. Crawford's face softened. Should be here within the hour. Margaret's legs finally gave out for real. She sat down right there in the hallway, surrounded by her children, and cried. Nate arrived as the sun was setting. Margaret heard the horse. Before she saw it, heard Tommy shout, "He's here!" Heard the thunder of hooves in the frozen yard. She ran outside without her coat, without thinking. Nate was dismounting, his face bruised, his wrists raw from shackles, but alive. Alive and free. Margaret. Nate. She crashed into him so hard they both nearly fell. His arms came around her tight and desperate and trembling. I thought, his voice cracked, when they told me what happened when they said Whitmore was coming here with his men. I'm fine. We're all fine. The children, all safe. Every single one. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, to search her eyes. You did it. You got the papers to Helena. Tommy did it. He rode through the night in a blizzard to find those marshals. Margaret laughed through her tears. Our boy did it. Our boy. The word hung between them. Margaret felt her face flush. I didn't mean... Don't. Nate's hand came up to cup her cheek. Don't take it back. Please. Nate, I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. I know this whole thing started as a lie. His voice was raw, stripped bare. But Margaret, when I was in that cell thinking I might never see you again, all I could think about was how much I wanted the chance to make it real. Make what real? This, us, a family. His eyes searched hers. I'm not asking for an answer now. I'm just asking for the chance. Margaret thought about Daniel, who'd been her whole world for 20 years. Thought about the life they'd built together, the children they'd raised, the dreams they'd shared. Then she thought about this man, this broken, haunted, honorable man who'd risked everything to right his father's wrongs. Who'd looked at her 9 children and seen a family, not a burden. Who was standing here now, bruised and bleeding, asking for nothing more than a chance. You'll have to earn it, she said. I know. Every day, for the rest of your life. I know. I don't need a hero, Nate. I need a partner. Someone who's going to stand beside me, not in front of me. I can do that. And my children come first. Always. No matter what. They should. They're extraordinary. Nate smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. Just like their mother. Margaret leaned up and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, 2 wounded souls reaching for each other across a gulf of grief and fear. But it was real. It was honest. It was a beginning. Pa! They broke apart to find Bridget barreling toward them across the yard, her small legs churning through the snow. Nate caught her, swinging her up into his arms. Hey there, little one. Ma said the bad men are gone. She's right. They're gone. Forever. Forever. Bridget wrapped her arms around his neck and squeezed. Good. I don't like bad men. Neither do I, sweetheart. Neither do I. The other children were emerging from the house, now drawn by the commotion. Tommy led the way, Rosie behind him with Martha on her hip. The twins came next, then Patrick, then Samuel, Colleen. 9 children forming a semicircle around Nate and Margaret. Kids. Margaret's voice was steady, strong. I think it's time we had a family meeting. About what? Patrick asked. About what happens next. She looked at each of them in turn, Tommy with his father's jaw, Rosie with her quiet wisdom, Patrick with his fierce loyalty, the twins with their unbreakable bond, Colleen with her silent grief, Samuel with his tender heart, Martha with her stubborn determination, Bridget, with her sunshine soul. Her children. Her life. Her reason for everything. "Mr. Callahan has asked us to stay," Margaret said carefully, "to make this place our home. Our real home." "What do you want, Ma?" Tommy asked. Margaret smiled. "I want to stop running. I want to build something instead of just surviving. I want you all to have the life your father wanted for you." She reached for Nate's hand. "And I think we might be able to do that here." Silence. Then Patrick stepped forward. "Does this mean I get to keep working with the horses?" Laughter burst from Margaret's throat, surprised, relieved, alive. "Yeah, baby. It means you get to keep working with the horses." "Then I'm in." One by one the others nodded. Rosie, the twins, Samuel. Even silent Colleen dipped her chin in agreement. Tommy was last. He looked at Nate for a long moment, man to man. "You heard her," he said quietly, "and I'll make Whitmore look like a Sunday school teacher." "Fair enough." Tommy nodded. "Then welcome to the family, sir." Nate's face broke into a real smile. "Thank you, son." And standing there in the frozen yard, surrounded by children and snow and the promise of something new, Margaret Sullivan finally allowed herself to believe. They were home. The peace lasted 3 days. 3 days of healing, of breathing, of watching her children laugh without fear. 3 days of Margaret allowing herself to believe the nightmare was truly over. Then Marshal Crawford rode back to the ranch with news that shattered everything. Whitmore escaped. Margaret's blood turned to ice. What? Last night, someone helped him break out of the federal holding facility in Helena. Crawford's face was grim. Killed 2 guards on the way out. How is that possible? He was under constant watch. Money talks, Mrs. Sullivan, even in federal custody. Crawford dismounted his movements, heavy with exhaustion. We've got men tracking him, but in this weather with a head start. He's coming here. Nate's voice was flat. He's coming for us. We don't know that. I know it. Nate stepped forward, jaw tight. Whitmore doesn't run. He retaliates. Everything he built, everything he was, we destroyed it. He won't leave until he makes us pay. Margaret thought about her children inside, finally feeling safe. Thought about Bridget's laughter, Patrick's smile, the way Colleen had started speaking again. How long do we have? If he's riding hard, maybe a day, maybe less. Crawford looked between them. I've got 4 men I can spare. It's not enough to guarantee protection, but it's not enough. Nate shook his head. Whitmore knows this territory better than anyone. He's got friends hiding places, people who owe him. 4 men won't stop him. Then what do you suggest? Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Margaret, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Resolution. We don't wait for him to come to us. We go after him first. Nate. He's wounded, on the run, desperate. That makes him dangerous, but it also makes him sloppy. Nate's voice hardened. I know where he'll go. There's a cabin in the high country belonged to his family before they came to Copper Springs. It's where he'd run when things got bad. You want to ride into the mountains after a cornered murderer. I want to end this, once and for all. And if you get killed... Nate flinched. Margaret. No. She stepped forward, grabbing his arm. You listen to me, Nathaniel Callahan. I didn't survive everything we've been through to watch you ride off on some fool crusade and never come back. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. You can't come. The children? Adelaide can watch the children. She's done it before. Margaret's jaw set. I shot a man who tried to take my daughter. I held off Whitmore's deputies with a rifle. Don't you dare tell me I can't handle this. Nate stared at her. For a moment she thought he'd argue. Thought he'd give her all the reasons why she should stay behind, stay safe, stay protected. Instead, he nodded. Together then. Together. Crawford cleared his throat. I hate to interrupt, but if you're serious about this, we need to move. Now. Every hour we wait is an hour Whitmore gets further away. Give us 10 minutes. Margaret turned toward the house. I need to talk to my children. They were gathered in the kitchen eating breakfast, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over them again. Tommy looked up first, and she saw the moment he read her face. What happened? Whitmore escaped. Silence crashed through the room. Patrick's spoon clattered against his bowl. The twins grabbed each other's hands. Colleen went rigid. Is he coming here? Rosie's voice was steady, but her face was pale. We don't know, but we're not going to wait to find out. Margaret knelt, gathering the younger ones close. Mr. Callahan and I are going after him. Marshal Crawford's men will stay here to protect you. No. Tommy was on his feet. No, Ma, you can't. Thomas. You can't leave us again. Not after everything. His voice cracked. What if something happens? What if you don't come back? Margaret's heart shattered. She thought about all the times she'd left him in charge, all the weight she'd put on his young shoulders. Thought about the fear in his eyes that he tried so hard to hide. Come here. Tommy resisted for a moment, then crossed the room and let her pull him into her arms. I'm coming back, she said into his hair. I promise you I'm coming back. But right now that man is out there, and as long as he's free, none of us are safe. Not you, not your brothers and sisters, not anyone. Then let me come with you. No. Ma. You're needed here. She pulled back, gripping his shoulders. Adelaide's strong, but she's not young. The marshals don't know these children like you do. If something happens, if Whitmore sends men here while we're gone, I'll protect them. I know you will. Margaret cupped his face. That's why I'm trusting you. Because you're the bravest person I know, Thomas Daniel Sullivan. Braver than me. Braver than your father. You've proven it over and over. Tommy's eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. 15 years old and already too old for tears. Bring him back too, he said quietly. Mr. Callahan, bring him back. I will. She said goodbye to each of them. Rosie, who hugged her tight and whispered, Be careful, Ma. Patrick, who made her promise to shoot that bad man if you have to. The twins, who clung to her like they'd never let go. Samuel, who gave her his lucky stone, a piece of quartz he'd found on the journey west. Martha, who pressed a wet kiss to her cheek. Colleen, who spoke for the first time in days, I love you, Mama. And Bridget. Little Bridget, who didn't understand what was happening but knew enough to be scared. Mama's coming back. Mama's always coming back, baby. Always. Promise? Promise. She kissed Bridget's forehead, handed her to Rosie, and walked out of the kitchen without looking back. If she looked back, she'd never leave. They rode out within the hour. Margaret, Nate, Marshal Crawford, and 2 of his deputies. 5 riders heading into the mountains after a killer. The trail was treacherous, ice-slicked rocks, narrow passes, drops that made Margaret's stomach lurch. But Nate knew the way, and he pushed them hard. He'll be traveling alone, Nate said as they climbed. Whitmore never trusted anyone enough to take them to that cabin. It's his bolt hole, his secret. Then how do you know about it? Catherine told me. She found references to it in his papers back when she was investigating. Nate's jaw tightened. She wanted to go there, see what he was hiding. I told her it was too dangerous. But she went anyway. She was going to. The week she died, she told me she had a plan. Said she'd found something that would finish Whitmore for good. Margaret processed this. You think whatever she found is still there at the cabin? I think it's possible. Whitmore never went back after Catherine died, probably too scared of what she might have left behind. Nate met her eyes. If there's more evidence, more proof of what he's done, it could be there. Or it could be a trap. Also possible. Crawford's horse drew up beside them. We're about an hour out. What's the approach? The cabin sits in a valley backed against a cliff. One way in, one way out. Nate's voice went tactical. If Whitmore's there, he'll see us coming. No way to surprise him. Then what's the plan? We don't need to surprise him. We need to draw him out. Nate looked at Margaret. And I know how to do it. How? By giving him what he wants. Me. Absolutely not. Margaret, you are not using yourself as bait. It's the only way. Whitmore wants revenge. He wants to see me suffer. If I ride in alone, he'll come out. He won't be able to resist. And then what? He shoots you and rides away. Then you and Crawford come in from the sides while he's focused on me. Nate's voice softened. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to end this. By getting yourself killed. By taking a calculated risk. He reached over, took her hand. I've spent 4 years living in fear, Margaret. Fear of Whitmore, fear of the truth, fear of letting anyone close because I might lose them too. I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting that man control my life. Margaret wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse to find another way to protect this man she was just starting to love. But she saw the determination in his eyes, the need to face his demons, the absolute refusal to run anymore. If he kills you, she said quietly, I'll never forgive you. Then I'd better not get killed. The cabin came into view as the sun began its descent. It was smaller than Margaret expected, weathered and gray hunched against the cliff like a wounded animal. A thin trail of smoke rose from the chimney. He's here. Crawford's voice was barely a whisper. Everyone in position. Mrs. Sullivan, you take the east approach. Henderson west. I'll cover the north. And me? Nate asked. You do what you said. Ride in, draw him out. Crawford's face was grim. And try not to die. Nate dismounted, adjusted his gun belt. Then he turned to Margaret. Whatever happens, don't. She grabbed his collar, pulled him close. Don't say goodbye. Don't act like this is the end. You ride in there, you do what you have to do, and you come back to me. Understand? Yes, ma'am. She kissed him hard, desperate, full of everything she couldn't say. Then she let him go. Nate rode toward the cabin alone. Margaret positioned herself behind a rocky outcrop rifle, steady heart pounding. She could see the cabin, could see Nate's figure approaching slowly, deliberately. Whitmore. Nate's voice echoed off the cliffs. Cornelius Whitmore. I know you're in there. Come out and face me. Silence. You wanted revenge. Here I am. No marshals, no deputies, just me. The cabin door creaked open. Whitmore emerged, and Margaret barely recognized him. 3 days on the run had stripped away his polish, his elegance. His silver hair was wild, his clothes torn, his face gaunt with desperation. But the gun in his hand was steady. Nathaniel. His voice was raw. You came. I came. Do you know what you've cost me? What you've destroyed? I know exactly what I've destroyed. An empire built on blood and lies. Families ruined, lives taken, justice twisted into a weapon. Nate's voice hardened. You deserved worse. I deserved... Whitmore laughed, a broken, ugly sound. I built this territory. I brought law where there was chaos. I made something out of nothing. You murdered innocent people. I made necessary sacrifices. For the greater good. For progress. Whitmore's gun rose. And now you've undone it all. Everything I worked for, everything I built, gone. Because of you and that meddling wife of yours. Catherine was right to expose you. Catherine was a fool. Whitmore's voice cracked. She could have looked the other way, could have enjoyed the wealth and privilege I'd helped create. Instead, she chose to dig up bones that should have stayed buried. So you killed her. I did what had to be done. The words exploded out of Whitmore, raw and ragged. She was going to destroy everything. She found the proof, all of it hidden right here in this cabin. Letters, ledgers, everything my father and yours used to build our empires. She was going to take it to Washington. To the federal government. Margaret's breath caught. The evidence. It was here. It was still here. The doctor, Nate said slowly. Whitfield. He was supposed to make it look natural. He was supposed to be competent. Whitmore spat. Drunk fool botched it. Had to pay him a fortune to disappear. And the baby. Whitmore flinched. Just slightly, but Margaret saw it. That wasn't... I didn't want... He stopped, composed himself. Collateral damage. Unfortunate, but unavoidable. You murdered a child. I eliminated a threat. Whitmore's composure shattered completely. Do you understand what she would have done? What she would have destroyed? 30 years of work, 30 years of building something. Something rotten, something evil, something necessary. Whitmore raised his gun, aimed at Nate's chest. And you're just like her. Can't leave well enough alone. Can't understand that some secrets are better left buried. You're done, Whitmore. Even if you kill me, the marshals have enough to... The marshals have paper, copies, secondary sources. Whitmore's smile twisted. But the original's the real proof. It's still here, still hidden. And when I'm gone, it'll stay hidden forever. Then tell me where it is. Why would I do that? Because you're going to die here, Cornelius. Nate's voice was calm. You know it. I know it. There's nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. This is the end. Then why should I make it easy for you? Because Catherine deserves justice. The families you destroyed deserve justice. The truth deserves to be known. Nate stepped forward. You can die as a monster remembered for nothing but your crimes. Or you can die with one shred of decency left, one act of redemption. Whitmore's gun trembled. For a moment, Margaret thought he might actually do it. Might actually reveal where he'd hidden the evidence, might actually choose conscience over ego. Then his face hardened. Redemption is for fools. He fired. Margaret screamed, but Nate was already moving, diving left as the bullet whistled past his ear. He hit the ground, rolled, came up with his own gun drawn. Crawford's shot cracked through the air, catching Whitmore's shoulder. The judge stumbled, fell. Margaret was running before she knew she'd moved. Nate. I'm all right. He was on his feet, crossing to where Whitmore lay groaning in the snow. I'm all right. Margaret reached him, grabbed his arm, assured herself he was whole. Then she looked down at Whitmore. Blood was spreading from his shoulder, staining the white snow red. His face was twisted with pain and hatred. Finish it, Whitmore hissed. Finish it, you coward. No. Nate holstered his gun. You're going to stand trial. You're going to face justice. And everyone is going to know exactly what kind of man you are. Trial. Whitmore laughed, blood on his lips. You think a trial will change anything. You think the truth will set you free. I think it's a start. Crawford reached them, his deputies close behind. Secure him. Get that wound treated. I want him alive for the hangman. As they hauled Whitmore to his feet, the judge's eyes found Margaret. You, he breathed. You're the reason. You and your brats. If you'd never come here. If I'd never come here, you'd still be ruining lives and murdering innocents. Margaret's voice was steady. I'm glad I came. I'm glad I got to help bring you down. Whitmore's face contorted with rage. You'll regret it. Someday, somehow, you'll regret. That's enough. Nate stepped between them. Get him out of here. They dragged Whitmore away, his threats fading into the wind. Margaret sagged against Nate, suddenly exhausted. It's over. It's really over. Almost. Nate looked at the cabin. He said the evidence is still here. The originals. Everything Catherine found. He could have been lying. He wasn't. Nate's jaw set. I saw his face when he talked about it. He was proud. Proud that he'd hidden it all these years, proud that even now he might beat us. Then we search. It took them 2 hours. The cabin was small, but Whitmore had been clever. False walls, hidden compartments, floorboards that lifted to reveal hollow spaces beneath. Margaret found it behind the fireplace, a metal box rusted with age locked tight. Nate. He came to her side, took the box, turned it over in his hands. This is it. This is what Catherine was looking for. He broke the lock with the butt of his gun. Inside were papers, dozens of them, yellowed with age, but perfectly preserved. Letters, ledgers, maps, contracts. A complete record of 30 years of corruption, fraud, and murder. And at the bottom, a single envelope addressed in neat feminine handwriting. To Nathaniel, my love. Nate's hands shook as he opened it. Margaret watched his face as he read, watched the emotions flicker across it like shadows. Grief, love, anger, and finally peace. What does it say? Nate looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks. She knew. She knew she was in danger. She wrote this the night before she died, hid it here along with the evidence. His voice broke. She says she's sorry. That she never wanted to put me in danger. That she loves me, and she hopes someday I'll find this and know the truth. Nate. She asks me to finish what she started, to make sure the families get justice, to not let her death be meaningless. He clutched the letter to his chest. She believed in me, Margaret. Even at the end, she believed I could fix this. And you did. We did. He reached for her, pulled her close. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Without your strength, your courage, your stubborn refusal to give up. I had good motivation. 9 of them, actually. Nate laughed, a real laugh, full of relief and joy. Let's go home, he said. Let's go back to our family. Our family. The words wrapped around Margaret's heart like a promise. Yes, let's go home. The ride back took longer than the ride out. They were tired, wounded in ways that didn't show, carrying the weight of everything they'd discovered. But with every mile, Margaret felt lighter. The truth was out. Whitmore was captured. Catherine's evidence would finally see the light of day. It was over. When the ranch came into view, Margaret's heart swelled. Mama, they're back! Patrick's voice carried across the yard, followed immediately by a thunder of footsteps. Children poured out of the house, all 9 of them running toward the riders, like their lives depended on it. Margaret barely had time to dismount before she was surrounded. You're okay. We were so worried. Did you catch him? Is the bad man gone? Tommy wouldn't let us come outside? I was scared, Mama. She gathered as many of them as she could, pressing kisses to foreheads, checking for injuries that weren't there, assuring herself that they were safe. They were whole. They were hers. We caught him, she said when she could speak. The bad man's gone. He's never going to hurt anyone again. Bridget squirmed in her arms. Never, ever. Never, ever. Tommy hung back watching. When Margaret finally extracted herself from the tangle of children, she went to him. You okay? Yeah, his voice was rough. Just glad you're back. Me too. She hugged him, her oldest, her rock, her partner in survival. I'm proud of you, Thomas. So proud. I didn't do anything. You kept them safe. You kept them calm. You did exactly what I asked. She pulled back to look at his face. That's everything. Tommy's composure cracked just for a moment, and she saw the boy beneath the man he was trying to be. I love you, Ma. I love you too, baby. Always. Adelaide appeared on the porch, her face wet with tears. Thank God. Thank God you're all right. Whitmore's in custody. Nate climbed the steps, pulled his aunt into an embrace. It's over, Addie. It's finally over. And Catherine, did you find? We found everything. Nate's voice softened. She left a letter, for me. She'd hidden it with the evidence. Adelaide's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Nathaniel. She knew what was coming. She prepared for it. Nate swallowed hard. She wanted us to finish what she started. And we will. We will. Every family my father and Whitmore destroyed, we're going to make it right, every last one. Adelaide hugged him again, tighter this time. Margaret watched them, her heart full. This family, broken, wounded, pieced together from grief and desperation, was becoming something whole, something real, something worth fighting for. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Margaret and Nate sat together on the porch. "I've been thinking," Nate said quietly, "about what comes next. And the trial will take months. The evidence has to be processed. Witnesses called, cases built against everyone Whitmore was connected to." He paused. "It's going to be hard, complicated. There'll be days when it feels like we're not making progress. I can handle hard. I know you can." He took her hand. "But I want you to know, whatever happens, whatever comes next, I'm committed to this. To you, to those children." "I know. Do you?" He turned to face her. "Because I need you to understand what you're taking on. This ranch, this legacy, it's not just land and cattle. It's generations of sin that I'm trying to redeem. It's going to take years, maybe the rest of our lives." "Then we'd better get started." Nate studied her face. "You really mean that?" "I really mean it." Margaret squeezed his hand. "I came here looking for survival, Nate. Food, shelter, a chance to keep my children alive. I found something more. I found a home, a family, a future. Even with all the complications. Especially with all the complications." She leaned closer. "I've never wanted easy Nathaniel Callahan. I wanted real. And this is the realest thing I've felt since Daniel died." For a long moment he just looked at her. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. Margaret's breath caught. It was a ring, simple silver worn with age. "This was my mother's," Nate said quietly. "She gave it to my father the day they were married. Told him it was a promise that no matter what came, they'd face it together." "Nate, I know it's soon. I know we barely know each other. And I know I'm asking you to take on more than anyone should have to." His voice shook. "But Margaret Sullivan, I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and your fierce determination to protect the people you care about. I love your children like they're my own, and I want to spend the rest of my life earning the right to call you my wife." Tears streamed down Margaret's face. "Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to think about it. When you're ready, if you're ever ready." He pressed the ring into her palm. No pressure, no expectations, just a promise that I'm not going anywhere, that whatever comes next, we face it together. Margaret looked at the ring, felt its weight in her hand. She thought about Daniel, who'd been her whole world for 20 years. Thought about the life they'd built, the dreams they'd shared, the future that had been stolen from them. Then she thought about Nate. This broken, beautiful man who'd fought through his own darkness to find the light. Who'd looked at her 9 children and seen a gift, not a burden. Who'd risked everything for justice and truth. She thought about what Daniel would want for her, for their children. And she knew. "Yes," she said. Nate's eyes widened. "What?" "Yes. I'll marry you." She slipped the ring onto her finger. "Not because I've forgotten Daniel, not because I'm looking for a replacement. Because I've found something new, something different, something that honors what I had while building toward what I can have. Margaret, but I have conditions. Anything. We take it slow. The children need time to adjust, and so do I. Done. You talk to me about everything. No more secrets, no more lies, no more trying to protect me from the hard stuff. Done. And you let me fight my own battles. I'm not some helpless maiden who needs rescuing. I'm a partner. Treat me like one." Nate smiled, that real smile she was starting to love. "Mrs. Sullivan, I wouldn't dream of treating you any other way." She leaned in and kissed him. Above them the stars wheeled in the endless Montana sky. And Margaret Sullivan, widow, mother, survivor, finally allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. The trial of Cornelius Whitmore began on a bitter February morning. Margaret sat in the front row of the Helena courthouse, her children arranged beside her like soldiers. All 9 of them scrubbed clean and dressed in their finest clothes Nate had bought for this occasion. Tommy sat straight-backed, his jaw tight. Rosie had Bridget on her lap. Patrick kept fidgeting until the twins elbowed him from both sides. Colleen was still quiet, but her hand found Margaret's and held tight. Samuel clutched his lucky stone. Martha had fallen asleep against Adelaide's shoulder. 9 children. Her 9 reasons for everything. All rise. The courtroom shuffled to its feet as the federal judge entered. Not a territorial judge this time. Washington had sent one of their own. A man named Harrison, who'd made his reputation breaking corruption in the railroad companies. Whitmore was led in chains on his wrists and ankles. He looked diminished, Margaret thought. Smaller than he'd been that day on the ranch. The fine suit was gone, replaced by prison gray. The silver hair had gone white. But his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, still burned with hatred when they found her. Margaret didn't flinch. The United States versus Cornelius James Whitmore, the bailiff announced. Charges include 17 counts of murder, 43 counts of fraud, 12 counts of extortion and conspiracy against the territorial government. 17 counts of murder. Margaret's stomach turned. She'd known the number, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real, in a way it hadn't been before. How does the defendant plead? Whitmore's lawyer rose. Not guilty, Your Honor. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Very well. Judge Harrison's voice was ice. The prosecution may begin. The federal prosecutor, a young man named Mitchell, who'd traveled from Washington specifically for this case, stood. Your Honor, the prosecution intends to prove that Cornelius Whitmore, over a period of 30 years, systematically used his position to enrich himself at the expense of innocent families. That he ordered murders, covered up crimes, and corrupted the very system of justice he was sworn to uphold. And that his final victim was Catherine Callahan, whose only crime was discovering the truth. Mitchell turned to the gallery. The prosecution calls its first witness, Nathaniel Callahan. Nate rose from his seat beside Margaret, squeezed her hand once, and walked to the witness stand. He was sworn in, sat down, and faced Mitchell with steady eyes. Mr. Callahan, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? He was my father's business partner, and later the man who arranged my wife's murder. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. Order, order in this court. When silence was restored, Mitchell continued. Can you explain that accusation, Mr. Callahan? My wife Catherine discovered evidence that my father and Whitmore had been involved in fraud and murder for decades. She was preparing to take that evidence to federal authorities. Nate's voice was steady, but Margaret could see his hands trembling. 3 weeks before she was scheduled to leave, she died. The official cause was complications from childbirth. The real cause was poison. Do you have evidence to support this claim? I have a receipt for payment to the physician who treated my wife, signed by Cornelius Whitmore. I have testimony from Silas Crenshaw, who was paid to ensure the physician's cooperation. And I have letters from Whitmore to my father discussing the need to silence anyone who threatened their operation. Objection! Whitmore's lawyer shot to his feet. This is hearsay and speculation. Overruled. Judge Harrison's voice was flat. The witness may continue. For 2 hours, Nate laid out the case. Every document, every payment, every death, traced back to Whitmore's orders. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the full scope of the corruption became clear. When Nate finally stepped down, Margaret saw tears streaming down Adelaide's face. The prosecution calls Margaret Sullivan. Margaret's heart hammered against her ribs as she made her way to the witness stand. Mrs. Sullivan? Mitchell approached with a gentle smile. Can you describe what happened when you arrived at Callahan Ranch? I came as a mail-order bride, a widow with 9 children looking for shelter. Margaret kept her voice steady. What I found was a house full of secrets and a territory controlled by a monster. Objection? Overruled. Can you describe your interactions with the defendant? He came to the ranch 3 days after I arrived, told Mr. Callahan to sell or face consequences. When Mr. Callahan refused, Whitmore had him arrested on false charges. Then he sent men to watch us to make sure we couldn't get the evidence out. And what happened then? My son, my 15-year-old son, rode through a blizzard to find the federal marshals. Nearly died doing it. Margaret's voice cracked. He did what grown men were afraid to do. He brought the truth to light. And when Whitmore escaped custody, he came back to kill us. Would have done it too if we hadn't tracked him down first. Margaret looked directly at Whitmore. He confessed, to my face, to killing Catherine Callahan and her baby. Said it was necessary. The courtroom erupted again. Margaret didn't look away from Whitmore's eyes until the bailiff forced him back into his seat. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witness after witness took the stand. Families who'd lost everything to Whitmore's schemes. Former associates who'd been threatened into silence. And finally Silas Crenshaw himself, the hired killer, who'd decided testimony was better than hanging. He paid me $500 for each problem, Crenshaw said flatly. The doctor was extra $1,000 to make sure Mrs. Callahan didn't survive the birth. And the baby wasn't supposed to die. But Whitfield was drunk like always, gave the wrong dose. Crenshaw shrugged. Whitmore didn't care, said it was cleaner that way. Margaret heard Adelaide sob, felt Nate's hand find hers in the darkness of the gallery. And you're willing to testify to this under oath. I'm willing to testify to anything if it keeps a rope off my neck. Crenshaw's eyes found Whitmore. Besides, he would have killed me eventually. He killed everyone who knew too much. I was just waiting my turn. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood his face grim. We have your honor. On the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find guilty? The word echoed through the courtroom. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On all remaining charges, guilty on all counts, Your Honor. Whitmore's face went white. For a moment, Margaret thought he might collapse. Then his eyes found her across the courtroom, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. Not defeat, not acceptance, rage, pure murderous rage. You, he hissed. You did this. You and your brats. You destroyed everything. Order. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. The defendant will be silent. I'll see you in hell, Margaret Sullivan. The bailiffs dragged him away, still screaming threats. Margaret sat frozen, her children pressed against her sides. Ma. Patrick's voice was small. Ma, is he going to hurt us? No, baby. She pulled him close. He's never going to hurt anyone again. Judge Harrison cleared his throat. The defendant is hereby sentenced to death by hanging. The execution will take place in 30 days. He banged his gavel one final time. This court is adjourned. 30 days. Margaret spent them learning to breathe again. The children helped. Tommy threw himself into work on the ranch, his shoulders finally losing some of their tension. Rosie started writing stories, poems, letters to a future she was finally allowing herself to imagine. Patrick discovered he had a gift with the horses, same as his brother. The twins made friends with the ranch hand's children. Samuel stopped asking when Papa was coming back. Martha learned to braid her own hair. Colleen started speaking again, not much, not often, but enough. And Bridget. Little Bridget, who'd been so sick when they arrived, grew strong and loud, and absolutely impossible. Mama. She came barreling into the kitchen one morning, her dress already dirty. Mama, Mr. Nate says I can help with the horses today. Can I please? Did you finish your breakfast? Yes, ma'am. Did you brush your hair? Bridget's hand flew to her tangled curls. I forgot. Then no horses until you remember. But Mama. Go. Bridget huffed dramatically but ran off to find a brush. Adelaide appeared in the doorway, a smile playing at her lips. She's getting stronger every day. Too strong sometimes. Margaret wiped her hands on her apron. She's going to run this ranch before she's 10. Good. It needs someone with her energy. Adelaide paused. Speaking of the ranch, Nate asked me to find you. He's got something he wants to show you. What? He wouldn't say. Just told me to send you to the chapel. Margaret's heart quickened. She found Nate standing outside the small chapel Catherine had built behind the house. His back was to her shoulders, tense. Nate? He turned and she saw tears on his face. Nate, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I was just saying goodbye. Margaret moved to his side. Through the chapel windows, she could see the simple altar, the wooden cross, the small memorial to Catherine and the baby who'd died with her. Goodbye. To the guilt, to the fear, to 4 years of wondering if I could have saved her. Nate's voice cracked. I've been carrying it so long I forgot what it felt like to be free of it. And now I'm ready to let go. He turned to face her, took both her hands in his. Margaret, I want to build something new. With you. With those children. Something good to replace all the bad. We're already doing that. I know, but I want to do more. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I've been working with the lawyers. The families my father destroyed, 12 of them. I'm returning their land. Every acre. Margaret stared at him. That's nearly half the ranch. I know. Can you afford to lose that much? I can afford to do what's right. Nate's jaw set. I don't want to build our future on stolen ground, Margaret. I don't want our children, your children, our children someday growing up with that shadow over them. Our children. The words wrapped around her heart. You're a good man, Nathaniel Callahan. I'm trying to be. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles. Will you help me? Always. They stood together in the shadow of the chapel, two broken people learning to be whole. The execution was held on a gray morning in March. Margaret didn't attend. Neither did Nate. Some endings didn't need witnesses. But when the telegram came confirming Whitmore's death, Margaret gathered her children in the kitchen and told them. The bad man's gone, she said simply. Forever this time. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Patrick was the first to speak. Good. Patrick, I mean it, Ma. He was evil. He hurt people. He deserves to be dead. Margaret looked at her 9-year-old son, saw the hardness in his eyes, and felt her heart ache. Maybe he did deserve it. But being glad someone's dead, that's a heavy thing to carry, son. Don't let it make you hard. Is it wrong to be relieved? No, relief isn't the same as gladness. Margaret pulled him close. You can be relieved that we're safe without celebrating that a man lost his life. You understand? Patrick nodded slowly. Good boy. Rosie cleared her throat. Ma, can we talk about something else now? Like what? Like your wedding. Rosie's face broke into a rare smile. Adelaide says you haven't set a date yet. Adelaide talks too much. She says you're being stubborn. I'm being practical. There's so much to do with the ranch, and the trials are still... Ma. Tommy's voice cut through. You're making excuses. Margaret sputtered. I am not... You are. You've been putting it off for weeks. Tommy crossed his arms. We ain't stupid. We know you're scared. I am not scared. Then set a date. Margaret looked at her children, all 9 of them, watching her with varying degrees of amusement and expectation. You've been talking about this behind my back. We've been worried, Rosie corrected. You deserve to be happy, Ma. And Mr. Nate makes you happy, so stop dragging your feet and marry him already. Marry him, marry him. Bridget started chanting. The twins joined in, then Samuel and Martha. All right, all right. Margaret held up her hands. Fine, I'll talk to Nate tonight. Promise? I promise. The cheering was deafening. She found Nate in the barn that evening, brushing down his horse. The children have staged a mutiny. Nate looked up surprised. What? Apparently I've been dragging my feet about setting a wedding date. Margaret leaned against the stall door. They've decided I'm being stubborn and scared, and possibly a coward. Are you? Probably. Nate set down the brush and came to her, taking her hands. Margaret, we don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I told you that from the start. I know. She looked down at their intertwined fingers. It's not about being ready. It's about... About what? About deserving it. The words came out barely above a whisper. 10 months ago, I was watching my children starve. I was selling everything we owned just to keep them alive. I was so desperate I answered a stranger's advertisement to become his wife. And now I have everything I ever wanted. A home, a family, a man who loves me. Her voice cracked. And I keep waiting for it to be taken away. Because good things don't happen to people like me, Nate. They just don't. People like you. Poor people. Desperate people. People who've already lost everything once. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I lost Daniel. I lost our home, our farm, everything we built together. What if I lose this too? Nate pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her. Listen to me, Margaret Sullivan. You are the strongest, bravest, most stubborn woman I've ever met. You crossed a territory with 9 children and 11 cents. You faced down a murderer with nothing but a rifle and a mother's fury. You saved my life, my ranch, my soul. Nate, you deserve every good thing that comes to you, every single one, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know that. He pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. Marry me, Margaret, not because the children want it, not because it's practical or sensible or expected. Marry me because you love me and I love you, and that's enough. That's more than enough. Margaret looked into his eyes, those gray-blue eyes that had been so haunted when they met, now filled with hope and love and certainty. April, she said. What? April, when the snow melts and the flowers start to bloom. She smiled through her tears. I want to get married in April. Nate's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. April it is. The wedding was held on a perfect spring morning. Margaret wore a simple white dress Adelaide had helped her make. Nothing fancy, she'd never been one for fancy, but clean and new and hers. Tommy walked her down the aisle, his 15-year-old shoulders squared with pride. Rosie served as maid of honor. Patrick stood beside Nate, as best man, taking the role more seriously than anything he'd ever done. The twins scattered flower petals. Samuel carried the rings. Martha and Colleen held Bridget's hands to keep her from running wild. 9 children surrounding their mother as she started a new chapter. Dearly beloved, the preacher began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Nathaniel James Callahan and Margaret Ellen Sullivan. Margaret barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at the people around her. Her children Adelaide, Martha, the ranch hands who'd become family. Marshall Crawford, who'd traveled from Helena just for this day. Her family, her real family. Do you, Nathaniel, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. And do you, Margaret, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Margaret looked at Nate, at this man who'd found her at her lowest and seen her strength, who'd looked at 9 hungry children and seen a gift, who'd fought beside her, bled beside her, nearly died beside her. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The preacher smiled. You may kiss the bride. Nate kissed her, and the children erupted in cheers. I love you, Mrs. Callahan, he whispered against her lips. I love you too, Mr. Callahan. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Margaret believed that everything was going to be all right. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and music and dancing, things Margaret's children hadn't experienced since before Daniel died. She watched Tommy teach Rosie to waltz, watched Patrick spin the twins until they were dizzy with laughter, watched Samuel and Martha chase each other around the yard while Colleen looked on with something that might have been a smile. And Bridget, of course, danced with everyone. The ranch hands, Adelaide, Marshall, Crawford, even the preacher couldn't escape her determined feet. Ma. Tommy appeared at her side, flushed and happy. Ma, this is the best day. Yeah. He hesitated. Pa would have liked him. Mr. Callahan, I mean. Margaret's throat tightened. You think so? I know so. Pa always said he wanted you to be happy. Said it was the most important thing. Tommy's voice cracked. You're happy now, right? I'm happy, baby. Truly happy. Good. He hugged her, quick, fierce, unexpected. That's all that matters. He was gone before she could respond, pulling Rosie back onto the dance floor. Margaret felt arms slide around her waist from behind. Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Callahan. She leaned back against Nate's chest, just thinking about how far we've come. And how far we still have to go. No. Margaret turned to face him. For once, I'm not thinking about the future. I'm just here, in this moment, with you and my children and this life we're building. That's a good place to be. It is. She kissed him softly. Thank you. For what? For everything. For the chance. For the hope. For looking at my 9 children and seeing family instead of burden. They are my family now. Nate's voice was fierce. All of them. Every stubborn, loud, impossible one of them. Even Patrick. Especially Patrick. That boy's going to run this ranch someday. I can already tell. Margaret laughed a real laugh, full and free. Come on. Nate took her hand. There's something I want to show you. He led her away from the celebration up a small hill behind the house. At the top he stopped. Look. Margaret looked. The ranch spread out below them, lit by lanterns and moonlight. She could see the house where her children were sleeping, the barn where the horses rested, the fields that would soon be green with spring growth. Their home. Their future. A year ago, Nate said quietly, I stood on this hill and thought about ending it all. The guilt, the grief, the loneliness, it was crushing me. I didn't see any way forward. Nate? Then I wrote that advertisement. One last desperate attempt to find something worth living for. He turned to her, eyes glistening. And you answered. You and your 9 children, hungry and scared but so damn brave. You walked into my broken life and made it whole again. We made it whole together. Together. He smiled. I like that word. Get used to it, Mr. Callahan. You're stuck with us now. Good. He pulled her close. I don't ever want to be unstuck. They stood on the hill as the moon rose higher, 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds. Behind them, the sounds of celebration continued, children's laughter, music, the noise of a family coming together. Ahead of them stretched the future, uncertain but bright with possibility. And in that moment, Margaret Sullivan Callahan understood something she'd forgotten in all the years of struggle and loss. Happiness wasn't something you waited for. It wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you chose every day, with every breath. She'd chosen to answer a stranger's advertisement. Chosen to travel across a territory with 9 children and 11 cents. Chosen to fight when running would have been easier. Chosen to love when fear would have been safer. And now she was choosing this life, this man, this family built from the wreckage of everything she'd lost. "Mappa, come quick!" Bridget's voice shattered the moment. Margaret and Nate ran down the hill, hearts pounding. They found the children gathered in the yard pointing at the sky. "Look! Look!" Margaret looked up, shooting stars, dozens of them streaking across the darkness like messages from heaven. "Make a wish, Ma," Patrick shouted. "Quick, before they're gone." Margaret closed her eyes. She thought about Daniel, who'd loved her first and best. About the farm they'd lost and the life they'd built. About 9 children who'd survived hunger and cold and danger to stand here tonight, healthy and happy and whole. She thought about Nate, who'd given them a home when they had nothing. About Catherine, whose courage had made all of this possible. About Adelaide and Martha and all the people who'd become family. She opened her eyes. "I don't need to make a wish," she said softly. "I already have everything I ever wanted." Nate's arm tightened around her waist. The children pressed close, and as the stars fell around them like blessings. Margaret Sullivan. Callahan finally understood the truth she'd been searching for all along. Home wasn't a place. It wasn't walls and roof and land. Home was this. These people. This love. This family she'd fought for and nearly died for, and would fight for again every day for the rest of her life. She'd come to Montana looking for survival. She'd found something better. She'd found home. Summer came to the ranch like a promise kept. Margaret stood on the porch watching her children scatter across the property. Tommy was in the corral working with a young stallion. Rosie sat under a tree writing in her journal. Patrick and the twins raced toward the creek, their laughter echoing off the mountains. Colleen helped Adelaide in the garden. Samuel and Martha chased chickens. And Bridget, "Mama, Mama, watch me." Bridget was on a pony. Her small legs barely reaching the stirrups, her face split with the biggest grin Margaret had ever seen. "I see you, baby. Hold on tight." I'm holding." Nate walked the pony in slow circles, his hand steady on the reins, his eyes never leaving the child on its back. Their child now, all 9 of them. Adelaide appeared beside Margaret, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "You look happy." "I am happy." Margaret took the offered cup. "It still surprises me sometimes." "It shouldn't. You earned it." "Did I?" "More than anyone I've ever known." Adelaide's voice was fierce. "You walked into hell and came out the other side with your children and your dignity and your faith intact. If that doesn't earn happiness, nothing does." Margaret watched Bridget bounce on the pony, watched Nate's patient hands, watched her family, living the life she'd dreamed of for so long. "Adelaide." "Yes." "Thank you for everything you've done for us." "I haven't done anything." "You've done everything. You took us in when you had every reason to turn us away. You stood beside us when it would have been easier to hide. You became—" Margaret's voice caught. "You became family." Adelaide's eyes glistened. "That's because you are family, Margaret. You and those children and that stubborn man down there. You're all I have left, and I'll be damned if I'm going to lose you." They stood together, 2 women who'd survived loss and fear and heartbreak. 2 women who'd found something worth holding on to. "Ma?" Tommy's voice rang across the yard. Margaret looked up to see him waving from the corral. "Ma, come see. This stallion's finally letting me ride him. Coming." She handed her cup to Adelaide and walked toward her son, her firstborn, her rock, the boy who'd become a man on the long road from Kentucky. "Look at him, Ma." Tommy's face was bright with pride. 3 months ago, he wouldn't let anyone near him. Now he's gentle as a lamb. "You did good, son. Mr. Callahan Pa, he taught me." Tommy caught himself on the word, flushed slightly. "He says broken things just need patience and kindness. Says that's true for horses and people both." Margaret's heart swelled. "He's a wise man, your pa." "Yeah." Tommy's voice was soft. "He is." They stood together watching the horses move in the corral. "Ma, yeah, baby. Are we going to be okay? Really okay?" Margaret thought about everything they'd survived. The hunger and the cold and the fear, the evil men who'd tried to destroy them, the losses that had nearly broken them. And she thought about everything they'd gained: a home, a family, a future. "Yeah, baby." She put her arm around his shoulders. "We're going to be okay. Really okay." Tommy leaned into her just for a moment. Then he straightened, squared his shoulders, and went back to work. Margaret watched him go, this son of hers, this boy who'd carried so much for so long. He was going to be all right. They all were. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Margaret sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. "Dear Daniel," she began, "it's been almost a year since I lost you. A year of grief and struggle and fear. A year I thought would break me, but I didn't break. I bent, I cracked, I nearly shattered. But I didn't break. I found someone, Daniel. A good man, a kind man, a man who loves our children like they're his own. I know that's what you would have wanted for us. I know you would have liked him. I still miss you. Every day, every hour, every time I look at our children and see your eyes looking back at me. That will never change. But I've learned that grief and love can exist together. That missing you doesn't mean I can't love him. That moving forward doesn't mean forgetting what we had. The children are thriving. Tommy's becoming a man you'd be proud of. Rosie's writing stories, beautiful stories about families and love and hope. Patrick's found his calling with horses. The twins are loud and wild and absolutely impossible, just like you said they'd be. Colleen is healing slowly. Samuel talks about you, sometimes tells Bridget stories about her daddy. Martha carries your pocket watch everywhere she goes. And Bridget. Bridget is sunshine incarnate. She doesn't remember you, but she carries you in her smile, in her laugh, in her fierce determination to live every moment to the fullest. I'm happy now, really happy. For the first time since you died, I can say that without feeling guilty. I hope you're at peace wherever you are. I hope you know how much you're loved and missed. I hope you're watching over us, seeing everything we've built. I'll love you forever. Daniel Sullivan. You were my first love, my first home, the father of my children. But I have room for more love now. Room for this new life we're building. Thank you for giving me the strength to find it. All my love, always Maggie." She folded the letter carefully, walked outside, and placed it in the chapel beside Catherine's memorial. Two people who'd died too soon. Two loves that had ended before their time. But their legacies lived on in the children they'd left behind, in the family that had formed from their loss, in the hope that had grown from their grief. Margaret stood in the moonlight, surrounded by everything she'd fought for and nearly died for. And she knew with absolute certainty that the fight had been worth it. Every tear, every fear, every moment of despair. Worth it. Because standing here now with a home and a family and a future stretching out before her, Margaret Sullivan Callahan understood the truth she'd been learning all along. Love wasn't something you found once and lost forever. Love was something you built day by day, choice by choice, with every act of courage and kindness and hope. She'd built it with Daniel in a small farmhouse in Kentucky. She'd built it again with Nate in a ranch house in Montana. And she would keep building it every day for the rest of her life. Because that was what mothers did. That was what survivors did. That was what love did. It endured. It grew. It became more than anyone ever thought possible. Margaret looked up at the stars, the same stars that had fallen on her wedding night. "We made it," she whispered to Daniel, to Catherine, to everyone they'd lost along the way. "We made it." Then she walked back into her home, closed the door against the darkness, and went to check on her sleeping children. 9 of them scattered through the house like seeds waiting to bloom. Her children, her legacy, her everything. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the mountains and the ranch came alive with noise and chaos and love, Margaret Sullivan, Callahan would rise with it, ready to face whatever came next, ready to fight for what mattered, ready to live, really live, for the first time in her life. Because she'd learned the hardest lesson and survived the darkest night, and she'd come out the other side with everything that mattered. A family built from fragments, a home carved from wilderness, a love strong enough to weather any storm. She'd arrived in Montana with 9 children, 11 cents, and one last desperate hope. She'd found something better than hope. She'd found herself.